It's working. Good morning.
Good morning.
Teresa, we're fashionably late for LinkedIn Live.
I know technology troubles. As you mentioned, if you're not out here every week, sometimes they boot you. So we're happy to be back.
Lesson learned. Lesson learned. Welcome. Happy New Year to anybody who's joining us. This is our first LinkedIn Live of 2023. I hope everyone had a restful holiday and is back jumping into 2023 with some enthusiasm for what we can create at work this year. So a positive attitude. We are Teresa and Cynthia from CultureTalk. We're co-founders of CultureTalk. If you are new to the conversation, CultureTalk is a system and a platform that takes this concept of culture, which is very intangible, and translates it through assessment tools and methodologies into something that we can talk about and join others in a conversation about.
Yeah, becomes a tangible business asset.
Right.
That's a critical key point. Is culture to be considered like a business asset, just like many of the other business assets that people are really clear about, that they understand is a must-have. So getting a handle on your culture is critical.
Absolutely. So we come here every week or every other week to talk about all kinds of different topics that are related to culture, because culture is like a web that touches so many different aspects of a business and has an impact on different aspects of the business. We are early this year focused on the topic of brand and experience. So how does an organization's culture impact, influence, and, become their brand, their employment brand? And how does that in turn impact the experience that employees have within an organization? So that's a general topic we're touching on early this year. And today we wanted to talk about employment branding. Other people might call it employer brand or talent branding, but the common theme is, how do we position our organization so that people that we're out there trying to recruit as employees understand what it's going to be like to come work for us?
What does it feel like?
What is that experience all about? And are we speaking and reflecting in a way that's authentic to who we are as an organization? And how do you get there? How do you uncover, different layers? What's the connection between the culture that exists and that employment brand positioning? So that's our topic today. Teresa and I have been engaged in a research project over the past 6 to 8 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. We have been speaking with professionals in the talent brand, employment brand space. And what we've been asking and considering and looking to understand is, how important is culture in conversations about employment branding? Like, in terms of chief talent officers, CHROs, different people within organizations that are responsible for the employment brand, are they considering culture as part of that conversation? And if so, how are they diagnosing it? How are they seeking to understand it? What tools are they using? And how's that working? So can share some high-level learnings from that experience. Teresa, do you want to comment at all? Or?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in the business press, we've been hearing about culture for a few years now. And especially as we came through the pandemic, there's a lot of talk about how does culture impact the employment experience. And really, this research that we've been doing has been to uncover, where does the rubber meet the road? How has the talk translated into action? And to your point, rigor around measuring and understanding what's really happening in the culture beyond maybe a high level, surface level, or lip service type treatment of the conversation around culture. Since we're focused on making it a tangible asset, we really want to understand, how is that playing out internally? And how is that playing out with folks who are directly responsible for the creation, the maintenance, and the nurturing of the employment brand? So it's a conversation that we're looking to go beneath the surface. And anyone who is joining us here today, we'd love to hear in the comments what your experiences have been on this topic, as we kind of dive in and share a little bit about what we're learning and what we've experienced. So questions that you have, or experiences, or even, are you seeing a shift? Are you seeing a change? Those things I think would be really interesting to bring into our conversation today.
Yeah, and I'll comment on a couple of things we're hearing. And I love that you said the rubber meets the road. Like, is it really alive in organizations? Is it really a concern in organizations? And one of the pieces of feedback we're getting is, finally, we're not just talking about it. There are leaders that are really considering, what does it mean? And how do we create and manage and, again, nurture culture with intention? So there is this sense, I think, that it is important, although there is still some confusion, even I think, about what culture is. So a rising tide on the idea of, yes, this is something important that we need to be paying attention to and we need to understand, but not necessarily tool sets and frameworks and ways of understanding it that become tangible enough. We heard in terms of, talent branders that are working in organizations, that they are asking questions about culture, that they are interviewing employees and leaders and maybe even employees who have left an organization to try to get the finger on the pulse, right? To understand and answer those questions about what is it really like to work here. But we were also hearing that sometimes those efforts can fall short.
Yeah, and I think another thing that we've been hearing is sometimes those questions get pushed aside because of the need to put people in seats. And so anything that causes friction or might get in the way of attracting people and putting them in seats is seen as a side road and something we might not have time for. So it's been a segment of people reporting back that they're still not able to bring the conversation in this direction. And so a takeaway that we're hearing from that is the speed at which you can get your arms around the culture is really critical, so that it becomes something that is additive without taking extra time necessarily. So the ability to move quickly into the conversation around culture, and yet we know the ability to do it right is critical. So it's a little bit of a tug of war, maybe.
Yeah, we want to do the right thing, but we can't afford to, slow down, if you will,
right,
the process of bringing the right people in. So something that Teresa and I have been really kind of thinking about is, how do we take this culture assessment tool and system into employment branding in a way that maybe hits both sides of that, provides more rigor and research that can actually deepen the employment branding conversation, but at the same time, in a way that can quickly build consensus, that can get people into the same conversation. And so we've been sharing, the work we're doing with our culture assessment, and specifically with archetypes, which are the framework that we use at CultureTalk. So archetypes, I think, is a more well-known word today. Years back when we started using it, people said, an arc, a what? There was a lot of confusion. But archetype is just a way of talking about story and storyline and story patterns. And the system that we use at CultureTalk actually is built around 12 storylines. And so when we bring in an organizational culture assessment, or one of our partners brings in a culture assessment, what they are able to do is to measure in an organization, how does the culture here align with 12 different story patterns?
Right. And back to that ability to do it quickly and concisely and build consensus around that, so that you're not sort of slowing that process down. I think that's really another important thing too, is that this measurement of the culture can happen quickly. Another idea that I think is important to this conversation, Cynthia, is when we say employment brand, many times people begin with the conception of recruiting. Of course, recruiting is a critical reason why an organization, undertakes an employment brand to begin with. Maybe they have some pain around recruiting. Maybe they're expanding and this is a great opportunity and they want to be, attracting people to them. But retention is just as critical in the employment brand conversation. And with regard to that, the value of doing this type of work, helps you to bring people in, the right people who are going to be a good match, and also helps you to keep the people that you have. And that can, add even more value from a dollars and cents perspective, because the HR group and the recruiting group can easily share what's the value of an employee that has to be replaced. So when we lose somebody in the environment. So I think it's important when we think about this measurement that you're talking about, not only the people you want to bring in the door, but the people that you want to, contribute in an engaged and, have some longevity with your organization. So I think all of those things are part of this employment brand conversation.
It's where we cross that line into employee experience too, kind of how can we apply this storytelling framework to the employment brand, and beyond that, to bringing people into an experience that really reflects what we said about the organization.
I have a great story about that. So let me share about the employee experience and the employee brand at a hospitality company. So this was an organization that had a number of different restaurants, hotels, a conference center, a catering operation. So there were multiple facets to this hospitality company, but really definitely all driven from the same culture. And I love to tell this story that was kind of shared as part of creating this employment brand, where somebody called one of the restaurants and asked, I have a friend who is on hospice. This person is kind of making a wish list of things that they want to do before they pass away. They have never been to your restaurant. It's been on their wish list. They want to come here. I just want to check in with you to say, they might have some special needs, in bringing them to the restaurant. And the restaurant said, absolutely, we will do whatever it takes to create a great experience for your friend. And then they said, well, they also have a second thing on their wish list. Now, I know this isn't probably going to be possible, but they've never had lobster and they would love to have lobster at your restaurant. And so the chef didn't think twice. He came back and said, lobster is not on our menu, but bring your friends and we will create that kind of experience. So they did. They came into the restaurant and the chef came out to the table. And not only did he bring, he went to the grocery store. He bought the lobster. He brought it. And actually, after it was, cooked, he brought it out to the table. And he sat down at the table with these friends and he showed them how to open it and he cracked it. And he sat at the table and he created just an incredible experience. And as we know, it was kind of like this once in a lifetime experience. And so the question, that we take that story, right, as an example of a caregiver archetype, as an example of, what does it mean in this organization to have a caregiver culture and to create this experience of lobster being on the menu, kind of at least once in a lifetime was the language, that was used to language that aspect of the story. And how did the chef know that that was okay to stop operations and go shopping for a lobster, to stop operations and come out to the table? And that's the kind of analysis when we get clear around what does it mean to live in a culture that represents this archetype, this pattern, and to recognize that that is what's expected of me, that is the most important thing I could do today, is create this kind of unique experience, because that's who we are as an organization. And so I love the story around that, because story, to your point, creates such an incredible example. And it gives us something to pass on. And there's a lot of meaning that's just embedded in that story.
Even just hearing you tell it, I'm leaning in. I'm like, tell me more. I want to understand. Yeah. And I got such a clear picture of what the experience of being part of that organization was all about.
Yeah. So, yeah. What they care about, what they're committed to, and what do we have permission to how do we have permission to behave here? Yeah. We can take that story and put a framework around it and communicate that out through everything, that use to talk about the employment and the experience of being here. That starts to feel different. That starts to attract somebody to a different employment expectation.
I'm thinking, as you were telling that story, about another one of an organization based here in Colorado, where I am, that was looking at some brand positioning activity as part of their growing as an organization. And they were a company that serviced high-end corporate accounts that were bringing sales teams to Colorado to celebrate wins. And they would create these incredible experiences for their clients, actually in Colorado and beyond, at lots of different kind of resorts in beautiful locations. And when we went in and did some work with them around their branding, one of the archetypes that we measured really strongly was the hero archetype. And the hero archetype is definitely the energy of we'll do whatever it takes, right? We have that kind of commitment and dedication, in this case, to a client experience. But we were also looking to uncover the stories that represented that. And one that totally stands out for me was a story they told about being at a mountain resort in the evening, and they had planned for their client that there would be this incredible fireworks display going on in the mountains while they were like celebrating and having a dinner together. And the company they're waiting, the staff is waiting, like, why aren't the fireworks going off? Oh my gosh, something's wrong at the top, and we don't know why the fireworks aren't going off. And so one of the staff people that work for this organization, literally, she's dressed up, she has high heels on, and she says, I ran up the mountain in high heels to get the fireworks display to go. And they did get it to go. But to your point about kind of uncovering the story and the language, that became very representative for them of what do you do in a hero culture?
Yeah. What kind of a hero are you? The kind that runs up mountains in high heels. Well, that says something different about what it feels like to work here.
Yeah. So as you consider, maybe you work in employment branding, maybe you work for an organization in an HR role, in an L&D role, maybe you're a consultant working with organizations to help uncover and define, a brand positioning, the employment brand positioning, some of those intangible but important strategic business assets.
Yeah. And how do you bring it to life? I think it's one thing to define it, and then you have to bring it to life. Yeah. And I think that those two pieces, one can't do one without the other.
Yeah. There's many, strong processes that people use in those kinds of conversations. We are proposing that this culture assessment that we can add into an employment branding process adds that rigor, adds that speed, adds that depth that, really takes it to life, brings it to life through storytelling. So that's the work we're doing at Culture Talk when it comes to employment brand and employment experience. And that's the work we can support. So we're going to drop into the comments. We have a partner network, people who have come and trained to use these assessment tools and methodologies. And we have quite a few that work in the space of employment branding, brand positioning. So we'll drop in the comments links to some of their bios on our website if it's a conversation you want to have.
Yeah. And if you are an employment brander, somebody who's responsible for this, and you want to learn more about how to apply these tools to your clients and your projects, then also shoot us a quick note. We're happy to connect with you and to share with you more about how you might become part of that network that Cynthia was just talking about.
Wonderful. Hope your January is off to a great start. We will be back, not next week, but the following Thursday, back to our regular time, which is 11 Eastern. And we will be talking about personal branding and kind of what's the connection between personal brand and culture and purpose and some fun topics along that line. So hope to see you then. Thanks for joining us.